Hello again, this is John Burroughs, and I am going to do what I call a deleted chapter from my autobiography, 7 Years to Life. And this deleted chapter is called Capsized. I guess I have to begin kind of giving you a little background on my father. Actually, my birth father I didn't know well at all. My mom divorced him when he was an infant. All I know about him was that he was a raging, angry alcoholic. So the only dad I ever knew was my stepfather. So going forward, I'm going to call him Dad. So anyway, Dad was someone that, due to circumstances in his early life, had to go to work at a very young age. A lot of reasons behind that, too long to get into, but he ended up in the merchant marine, I think right around the time he was 18 or 19 years old. And he worked his way all the way up to captain over the years. And um, having learned quite a bit about the merchant marine from my father, being a captain of a ship was a huge responsibility. You had to have management skills, and you definitely had to have leadership skills. You were taking a boat anywhere from 325 feet long to 500 feet long, filled with cargo, numerous crew members, um, and you had to, like I said, you had to have a lot of management and leadership skills to do that. So this brings us to the dilemma. How did a person that became a captain in the merchant marine, did deliveries during the Vietnam era, had those leadership skills, had those the education at least to be a captain? Uh, how did he come up with such odd decisions later in his life? I'll never be able to explain it, but one of them was this. He decided he wanted to try, I'll call it, what is it, scuba diving or whatever it is. And he bought this inflatable dinghy, okay, enough to fit two or three people, a couple of, what do you call it, oxygen tanks, and the mask and all the other equipment that would go along with scuba diving. And it had a place where you could fit a 2.5 horsepower or maybe 5 horsepower outboard motor to the dinghy. It was really made more for calm waters, and you would think a person that had traveled his whole life throughout the seas would understand that a dinghy out in the ocean isn't exactly the safest way to go. But sometimes when he had his mind made up, that's what it was. So he had coerced my brother and I to go with him in the dinghy out to San Gregorio Beach. I believe it was San Gregorio. I think that's the one with the lighthouse out there. Um, and we got this dinghy, had it, and we inflated it and got the outboard motor on it and put the necessary equipment for the scuba diving into it. And we headed out on the Pacific Ocean in a little dinghy with a 2.5 horsepower motor. And as we got out there, I say we probably got a mile out. And when you're going out, as the swells are coming towards you, you want to meet them head on, not sideways or anything like that. So anyway, we made it roughly a mile out, and we were out there, and I've just had these premonitions or feelings that this is crazy. And I never participated in scuba diving lessons. My brother and my dad did, but they wanted me to come along, to watch the dinghy or whatever. Well, anyway, I guess the anchor we brought along, after being about roughly a mile out, couldn't reach the bottom. So it was one of those things where I had a little paddle and I had to kind of keep the thing straight to meet the swells. Well, in an ocean, the size of the Pacific Ocean, when you're roughly a mile out, eventually a little dinghy with a 2.5 horsepower motor, you're not going to be able to keep it straight as the swells come at you. So what happened was the dinghy turned sideways, and here came this swell, and before you knew it, uh, the rubber dinghy capsized. And this is with my dad and my brother already into the ocean, but the swells came over so hard that the boat capsized, or the dinghy, and I was underneath the dinghy with a little bit of air, and they saw other debris from the dinghy coming down, and they knew there was trouble up top. Well, anyway, to say the least, I knew there was going to be trouble down below because there was no way that they were going to be able to scuba dive that far out from the shore. So anyway, I got the dinghy. I don't know how. I was a very young man then, but I don't know how. I was actually not even in my 20s yet, but got the dinghy flipped over right side up, but it was now useless. So I started to swim the mile into shore to get help. I was hoping there was someone in the lighthouse, but apparently there wasn't. So I started swimming to shore, and I felt, oh, I'm not going to make it. But then I realized that the tide was coming in. And with the tide coming in, if you just calm down and relax and just take a couple of strokes, it's kind of like a surfer catching a wave. You catch a swell, and then you take a couple of strokes more, and you catch a swell, and you eventually get in there. Now, the beaches in Northern California are famous for their particularly cold water. I didn't have a wetsuit on like those guys were, and it was pretty damn cold. But anyway, I made it to shore. I was able to wave for help, and I think, and my brother might remember this differently, but I think there was someone in the lighthouse. My father and brother jettisoned their tanks, made it to the surface, and was able to slowly but surely come in like I came in. But needless to say, the dinghy, the motor, the tanks, the mask, everything was abandoned at the bottom of the ocean. So I always sometimes think about this story as to how did a captain of a massive merchant vessel that sailed every ocean you can name on this continent more than 10 times and take a dinghy out to an ocean rather than perhaps a lake or something else that was more conducive to that size boat. But anyway, I just wanted to tell that story because at the time, if you think swimming at the shore and looking ahead and thinking, oh my God, I'm never going to make it, I'm never going to make it, and then you feel the swell and you feel a little bit more confident, but then you start getting tired and then you start hyperventilating and you think you're going to pass out. The bottom line is, I was lucky, we were all lucky, but good old Dad, he was pissed at me. He was mad that he lost his dinghy and his equipment and stuff like that. But unfortunately, you can't keep something that small when a swell hits it on the side rather than on the pointed bow. Anyway, that's the end of the story called Capsized, and it's a deleted scene, and it's one I just remembered a few days ago and forgot to put in the book, because sometimes when I'm on the phone with my brother, we talk about a lot about that day, not so much about the how scary it was and the activity that went on, but the fact that we, at our young ages, I think like 16 and 13 or whatever it was, we both knew that this idea was not going to work. It just wasn't going to work. But anyway, that's the story of Captain Ahab and the dinghy, and I don't know if you enjoy it, not enjoy it, but it was something that was a big part of my life.